ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كل نفس ذائقة الموت ثم إلينا ترجعون. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
For the love of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
For the love of the lady that we are commemorating tonight, Al-Baneen alayhi salam, صلوا على محمد again.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
And to hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam, Al-Imam Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, صلوا على محمد with the loudest of your voices.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
One of the most devastating realities, and at the same time one of the most fortunate realities of this world, is the reality of death. No human being, no being is able to escape from this inevitable reality. No man, no woman in this hall can stand up and say that I am able to escape death. For death is inevitable. And as Muslims, we are continuously reminded to remember death. If you open the Holy Quran, you will realize that the Quran mentions death at least 165 times. Meaning that on average, in every 3 pages, you will read the word death in the Holy Quran. And if you open the books of Hadith, you will realize that Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam have narrated over 3,000 hadiths that regarding death, what it entails, what we should do when it comes to death, what happens to us when we die, what are the steps between our death and the grave, and so on and so forth. Over 3,000 hadiths. However, if you ask any Shia, any Muslims, what happens to us after we die, you would probably receive this answer, that we either go to heaven or hell. But when you dig deeper and ask more about the specifics, rarely would you find a sufficient answer. As if none of us is going to experience death in this life. If someone were to tell us that in 2 weeks you have an exam, for the students here, if someone were to tell you that you have an exam in 2 weeks, wouldn't we do our best to memorize the material, understand the test itself, how to answer the questions in that test, and try our best to get an A in that exam? But when it comes to death, that's something that we all know will happen to us. It seems like we've neglected it. Even though death reminds us of itself day in, day out. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, "Usikum bidhikr al-mawt wa iqlal al-ghaflati anhu. Wa kayfa ghaflatukum amma laysa yaghfalukum." I advise you to remember death and lessen your negligence about it. And lessen your negligence about it. For how how can you neglect something that never neglects you? We neglect death, but death never neglects us. If you forget death, it doesn't mean that death will never come to you. Every single one of us has lost a loved one in this dunya. And I wish I can sit on this minbar and tell you that none of us will lose any more loved ones again. Reality, the harsh reality of this world is that we will continue to lose loved ones and we will lose ourselves. And death reminds us of itself every single day. That is why Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, فَكَفَى وَاعِظًا بِمَوْتَ عَيْنْتُمُونَ. How can you forget death when you see dead people in front of you every single day? Open the TV today. You will realize that there are a number of people that died in this area. You open social media, you will see a video of someone dying. You go on Twitter, you read the news of hundreds of thousands of immigrants, of refugees dying in the middle of the ocean. But when we read these pieces of news, it's as if they're just numbers, as if nothing happened. We've become so desensitized to death, as if it doesn't matter anymore. Because we're so enamored by this dunya. We're so enamored with the pleasures and the fun and the excitement and the joy of this world. Yet our purpose is not in this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ إِنَّ الْمَوْتَ الَّذِي تَفِرُّونَ مِنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ. The death that you escape from, now, this is of course a metaphor. We can't really escape death, but we try to forget about death. When someone mentions death, you say, don't be a vibe killer. Let's not talk about death. When you remember death, you immediately try to forget about it. We're technically escaping death. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no matter how much you escape it, it's still coming to you. Therefore, in the short few minutes that we have today, let us remind ourselves of death and look together about what death entails. What happens when we're at the last moments of our lives? What happens to our bodies? What happens to our soul? How does it feel when we're placed in this small, tiny hole in the middle of this world? What happens when they put the dirt on our faces? What happens when our family and friends leave the cemetery and we spend the first night in the grave? It's a very grim reality, brothers and sisters. And what better nights to remember this topic than the nights of Ashura? There's a reason why we're all wearing black. And tonight is the night of Al-Baneen alayhi salam, the woman who sacrificed 4 of her children for Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, the woman who knows death more than anyone in this world. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. The first stop, brothers and sisters, in the journey of death is when a human being is on his or her deathbed. At that moment, we experience what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls sakratul maut. وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ ذَلِكَ مَا كُنْتَ مِنْهُ تَحِيدٌ. The agony of death. When the agony of death comes upon you, there's no escape. There's no escape. The Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam tell us at that moment, in these last few breaths that we have in this world, we begin to feel many pains. We can still feel the pain of this world. Now imagine you're dying on your deathbed, or whatever death you have, you feel the pain of that death. You're feeling the pain of your illness, of your sickness. On top of that, you feel of the pain of leaving this world, leaving your family, leaving your loved ones, your mother, your sister, your wife, your children, your brothers, your community, especially if they're surrounding you, they're crying. You feel the same pain. Even if you can't cry at that moment, you're feeling the same exact pain and more. So that's two types of pain. The third type of pain, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam illustrates that every one of us will begin to remember the money, the wealth that we accumulated in this dunya, and we realize how useless it is at that moment. Even if you're poor, you will realize, and you will begin to think of all the moments in which you spend to accumulate wealth, and how useless that amount of wealth is at that very moment. Because at that moment, if someone asks you, would you sacrifice your entire wealth, no matter how much it is, for the sake of living an extra night, you will say yes. So Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, every single one of us will begin to think of the moments in which we spent accumulating wealth. And we will have the pain that we didn't get the chance to spend that money. So that's three types of pain. And as we take the last few breaths of our life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow us to see things that we cannot see regularly. فَكَشَفْنَا عَنْكَ غِطَاءَكَ فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ. Now we have removed the covering, the veiling in front of you, so you have a sharp vision. Now you ask, what can we see at that moment? The narrations tell us that we can see three things. Number one, the angel of death. The angel that we've been escaping for our entire life, is in front of us. Number two is the shaitan and the many shayateen around him. And number three, and this is for the believers, you will see Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You will see Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, next to him Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fatima, and Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein. So imagine this scene. You're on your deathbed, you see Malik al-Maut, you see Shaitan from one side, and you see the Ahlulbayt on another side. And at this moment, this is what the Ahlulbayt call the moment of Adila. Why is it called Adila? Because a human being يعدل من الحق إلى الباطل. It's called Adila because a human being can switch from truth to falsehood in one moment. What do I mean? The shaitan and his many shayateen are there for a reason. Because that will be the very last few seconds of your life. So the shaitan wants to take advantage of those few seconds. So he will come up and he will try his best to whisper in your ear, to whisper in your chest, and tell you what you're seeing is false. If you disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right now, I'll save you from death. And that is why many people, they fall into that trap. That is a very critical moment for the person who's about to die. That is why there are so many recommendations for the family of that person to help out and to do their best to save their loved one. That is why there's a dua by the name of Dua al-Adila that you recite for the person who's on his deathbed, on her deathbed. You recite it for them. And as for the person who is dying, it is recommended to continuously say La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. And to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember the Ahlulbayt, remember the Day of Judgment, remember the Imams. And it's also recommended to recite this dua, رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وآله نبيا وبالقرآن كتابا وبعلي إماما وبالحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة الخلف الصالح المهدي أئمة وسادة اللهم إني رضيت بهم أئمة فارضني لهم إنك على كل شيء. I accept. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. I accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as my Lord. I accept Islam as my religion. I accept the Quran as my book. I accept Imam Ali and his sons as the Imams. Oh Allah, I have accepted them as Imams, so please have them accept me as their follower. Truly you are the most compassionate. Truly you are the all-powerful. That is the dua in which we are recommended to recite at the last moments of our lives. Now, if you are a believer in the Ahlulbayt, then I have good news for you. And you can find this narration, this piece of news, in Al-Kafi by a Shaykh Al-Kulayni. He says, when a believer is in the stage of Sakrat al-Maut, the Prophet, the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam, Jibreel, are with him. They stand by him. So before Jibreel can do anything, before Jibreel strips our soul away, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam tells Rasulullah, he tells him, O Rasulullah, with the status that you have to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help this believer, for he loved us, the Ahlulbayt. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi would talk to Jibreel and he'd tell him, O Jibreel, this man loved me and my family. So Jibreel would tell the angel of death, O angel of death, this man, this woman loved the Ahlulbayt. So take it easy with him. At that moment, he does his best to make it a smooth and easy process, even though it's not an easy process. It will never be an easy process. But he makes it as easy as possible for us. Another narration says that when the angel of death approaches a believer, he will act like a servant next to his master. How does a servant act next to his master? Scared, shy. That's how Malik al-Maut, inshallah, will approach us. And he will refuse to do anything before saying salam and assuring the person, assuring the believer that he is going to Jannah. Of course, that makes it so much easier. When you know where you're going, when you know that you're going to the best place possible, at that moment you will forget all of the miseries, all of the pain at that moment. However, there are some sins that make this journey 10 times harder. There's a story, and I'm sure most of you know this story. And it's a good reminder for us all. One day Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi goes to the house of a dying young man. Rasulullah, this man is dying, let us go visit him. He says, okay, let's go visit that man. He sits next to the man and he tries to tell him, say La ilaha illallah. Before you die, say La ilaha illallah. The man, he's on his deathbed, he tries to say La ilaha illallah, he stutters, he can't. Every time he tries to say La ilaha illallah, he stutters. And he cannot continue the sentence. Imagine spending your life 90 years, 80 years, 70 years, 50 years. And on the deathbed, you cannot say La ilaha. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he says, does this man have a mother? They tell him, yes. The mother comes. Rasulullah tells her, asks her, are you upset with him? She says, yes, Ya Rasulullah, I'm upset with him. In fact, I haven't spoken with this man in 6 years. Imagine not speaking to your mother, your mother that is alive for 6 years. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells her, for my sake, forgive him. She says, okay, also, I forgive him. So he looks at the man, he tells him, say La ilaha illallah. He says it. He tells him, what do you see? He tells him, I see a muscular man in front of me, and that man is wearing dirty clothes, and I see like he is choking me from my throat. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi tells him, recite this dua, Ya man yaqbalu al-yasir wa ya'fu an al-kathir, iqbal minni al-yasir wa'fu an al-kathir. O you who accepts the little and forgives the many, forgive my many sins and accept my little deeds. And at that moment he asks him once again, what do you see? He tells him, I see a very pleasant man that is smiling, that is holding my hand and telling me, let us go to Jannah. And at that moment, the man died. Now that man is lucky to have Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi next to him. That man was lucky that Rasulullah vouched for him in front of his mother. But if we have a bad relationship with our parents, if our parents are not happy with us, where would we end up? Who's going to save us at that moment? One day, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, sallu ala Muhammed.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
One day, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi was talking with Amir al-Mu'mineen about the pain of death. He tells him, oh Ali, some people will experience death. It will be so painful to them that Jahannam itself would not be able to handle that type. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is shocked. He says, oh Rasulullah, can that ever be someone from your own ummah? Rasulullah says, yes. He tells him, who is that man? He says, 3. A tyrant. Alhamdulillah, none of us are tyrants, I hope. You can be a tyrant of your own house. You don't have to be a tyrant of a town. But some people, some fathers, some mothers, they're the tyrant of their own house. A tyrant, those who steal from the orphans, and those who lie when testifying. Now you might say, none of these really apply to me, but let's be careful. Sometimes you can be a tyrant of your very own house. If you bully your siblings, if you bully your kids, some people, they do that. Some people, when they come, when you discuss someone in front of them, they will begin to add spices into the story. Yeah, that man did that and that man did that. Even though that man didn't do that, they would begin to add spices and exaggerations to the story. That's testifying in falsehood. Let us be aware. So that's until Malik al-Maut captures enters our soul. At that moment, we have departed from this life. And of course, brothers and sisters, this lecture is not encapsulating of every single detail of death. As I mentioned, there's 3,000 narrations. More than 3,000 narrations. So this is just to give us a better idea of what we should expect when we die. At that moment, our body and our soul detach from one another. Our soul departs from our body. But the scholars say that the soul will still linger around the body of a human being. The soul does not immediately leave and go away from the soul. It will stay close to the soul. And it will continuously feel what the body should be feeling. That is why when they place us in the muhtasal, where they should wash and shower our body before we are prepped to be in the grave, the narrations say that if you are a good believer, if you're a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the water will feel soothing and comforting for the body, for the soul. Now, if you're a disbeliever, that water will feel as if it's a scorching, hot body of water upon your body. It reaches a point in which your soul will literally feel like it's dying, even though you're dead. And then we are taken to our graves, and that is when the soul begins to feel the agony of death. That's when the soul begins to feel the loneliness of death. Just yesterday, you were with your community, with your family, with your friends, with your wife, with your children, and today, you are heading to a hole that's 6 foot deep, into a piece of land that you've never been to. That is why the narrations say that when we take a dead body to the cemetery, we should stop multiple times on the way to allow the body, to allow the soul to fully soak the moment. Because at that moment, the soul is feeling extreme levels of loneliness. And then we are placed into this grave, and the grave begins to say, أنا القبر, أنا بيت الوحشة, أنا بيت الغربة, أنا بيت الدود. I am the grave. Welcome to your new house. I am the house of loneliness. I am the house of worms. And we are placed into the grave. And that night is the most difficult night anyone can experience, ever. No night in this life, no night ever. That is by far the most difficult night a human being goes by. That is why it is recommended, once we bury our loved ones, we stay by their grave. And we recite verses of the Holy Quran for them. It is recommended that we pray Salat al-Wahsha, the prayer of loneliness on their behalf. Because at that night, there's no one next to you. You're in the dark, alone. Even Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, the perfect lady, the lady of heaven, before she dies, she tells Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, when you bury me, stay by my grave. Stay by my grave and recite verses of the Holy Quran, for this is the night in which a dead person would need the alive. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam is asking Amir al-Mu'mineen, what would you and I do on that night? Na'udhu billah. And once we are placed in the grave and our bodies are fully in and they put the dirt over our bodies, that's when the grave will begin to welcome us. Brothers and sisters, if we can all come a few steps forward. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Once we are placed in our grave and they place the dirt over our body and the grave is now fully closed, the grave will begin to welcome us. But in a welcome that none of us actually want. And that is what the narrations call ضغطة القبر, the pressure of the grave. The pressure will be so intense that if we were actually alive, we would die. And the sad reality about this pressure is that no human being can escape. Even the believers, they will have to go through the qatl. They ask one of the imams, they tell him, Imam, if someone isn't buried, someone is actually crucified, for example, how will this person go through ضغطة القبر? He says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will command the air to put pressure on his body. There's no escape. No matter how you die, no matter how you're buried or you end up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered, has destined ضغطة القبر on us. Now you might ask, why? Isn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all merciful? Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing this to us? Well, the answer, brothers and sisters, is that this ضغطة القبر for the believers, it serves as a way to cleanse their souls. I ask you, would you rather meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment with many sins, or would you rather go through ضغطة القبر and meet Him with half the amount of sins that you had on the day of judgment? Any rational person, any merciful person would tell you, I'd rather take ضغطة القبر. And that's basically what ضغطة القبر serves to the believers. And as for the disbelievers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is adding more punishment to what they deserve. So it's out of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy for Him to cleanse our souls before we meet Him on the day of judgment. And brothers and sisters, there are certain sins that increase the amount of ضغطة القبر. It's as if it's not enough for us to experience the normal one. There are certain sins that add to this intense pressure. One day, one of the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa by the name of Sa'ad ibn Ma'ad, he fights at the hands of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa in many battles. And in the year 5 Hijrah, he fights in a battle and he gets wounded. After a while, he dies from the wound of the battle. So man, this man is a Sahabi. He's actually a believer of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. He's one of the people who died at the hands of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. They tell him, oh Rasulullah, Sa'ad died. Rasulullah waits for his body. They shower his body. He was one of the first people to pick up his body and carry it towards the grave. The narrations say that Rasulullah would once carry the right side. A while later he would carry the left side. The Rasulullah walked without shoes, without sandals, barefoot towards the cemetery. That's how sad he was for Sa'ad bin Mu'adh. Once they arrived to the grave, Rasulullah himself went into the grave. He prepared the grave for Sa'ad, and he himself put the dirt on the body of Sa'ad and ensured that the grave is ready. So the mother of Sa'ad witnesses the scene, and she says, Ya Sa'ad, hani'an laka al-jannah. And I'm sure all of you who heard the story are saying, hani'an, what a man who was honored to be buried by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When Rasulullah hears the mother of Sa'ad, he tells her, calm down a bit. We're not guaranteed Jannah. And then he says, the pain, if you knew the pain that he is feeling at the moment in his grave. She tells him, why Rasulullah? He tells her, because he had bad akhlaq with his family. Bad akhlaq with his wife, with his children. So if the Sahabi who died at the hands of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, who was buried by the very hands of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, the man who Rasulullah walked barefoot in his own burial, is not immune from the pressure of the grave, then who am I and who are you? Now, the moment things calm down and you feel like you can finally catch a break in your grave after this intense pressure, two angels with the sound of thunder and eyes that shine like lightning and canines that reach the floor will come immediately towards you. Now it feels like it's a scene from a horror movie, but this time it's not fiction, it's reality. And these two angels are called Munkar and Nakir. Have you heard of good cop, bad cop? We're going to have good cop and bad cop in our grave. But actually, both of them are going to play bad cop. They're going to interrogate us with every single thing that we've done in this life. They're going to immediately ask, without any hesitation, Man Rabbuk? Ma Deenuk? Man Nabiyuk? Man Imamuk? And they expect me to answer without absolutely any hesitation. Without absolute hesitation. You answer immediately. But of course, imagine the scene. When you're so terrified, sometimes even if you know the answer, you begin to stutter. You begin to fail and not know what to say. And at that moment, it's recommended for families to stand above the grave and do what we call talqeen. They would teach us what to say. They would tell you, إذا أتاك الملكان منكر ونكير فقول الله ربي محمد النبي الإسلام ديني الكعبة قبلتي القرآن كتابي. Allah is my Lord, Muhammad is my messenger, Islam is my religion, the Quran is my book, the Kaaba is my qibla. And you would state the Imams one after the other until you reach the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asri wal Zaman. And at that point, you would pass the test. But not really. They're going to ask you for one more thing. And this is where it really gets tough. They will ask us, write down every single thing that you have done in this world. So the narrations say that we're going to immediately begin to write all the good stuff that we wrote. I prayed this day, I prayed this day, I didn't miss a salah, I fasted every single year, I wore the hijab, I was kind to my parents, I did this, I did that, I did that. But once we're done, that's 50%, or hopefully more. But we still have the rest of our deeds, the rest of our actions in this world to write. And that's the bad stuff. The sins that we've committed in this world, all the lies that we said, all the ghibas that we did, all the money that we took, la samahallah, all the halal food, all the Chick-fil-A that we ate. Right? So we have to write that down. And at that moment, we become hesitant to write. And Munkar and Nakir, they look at us and they tell us, why are you not writing? What's happening? And they tell you, were you shy? Why weren't you shy when you committed the crime? You're shy to write it in front of us? You're going to have to present it to your Lord in a few days on the Day of Judgment. But for the believers, for the Shia of the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam, inshallah, we're able to succeed. And at that moment, when we succeed, our graves will become rawdatun min riyad al-jannah. Our graves will become a place in paradise. And if we fail, hufratun min hufar an-nar, a hole in the hellfire. So we can immediately begin to feel Jannah and Jahannam in our grave. And that's when Alam al-Barzakh begins. No need to go further into Alam al-Barzakh, but Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Imam al-Sadiq, he says, on the Day of Judgment, we will be able to grant intercession for our lovers. But what we fear the most for our lovers, for our Shia, is the Barzakh. From the moment that hole turns into hell or heaven until the Day of Judgment. That's how long Barzakh lasts. In Barzakh, there's no intercession. It's all about us and our deeds. So if we are good people, if we are the believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we actually committed good deeds, if we didn't abuse others, if we didn't take the rights of others in this dunya, if we utilized our time greatly in this world, then we should survive Barzakh. But if not, then we should be right. So brothers and sisters, I'm sorry to make it a very dark majlis tonight. And inshallah we'll have lighter majalis in the upcoming nights. But it's important. It's important for us to realize that at the end of the day, we're all going to end up in those graves. We're going to be alone. It doesn't matter who we're married to, it doesn't matter how many kids we have, it doesn't matter how much money we have, it doesn't matter if you drive a BMW or if you drive a 2002 Camry. It doesn't matter. You're going to have to go through it alone. Tonight we commemorate a lady that sacrificed everything she had for the sake for the sake of the day in which she will end up in the grave and the hereafter. What is more valuable to a parent than her very own children? Al-Baneen alayhi salam didn't sacrifice one, she didn't sacrifice two, she didn't sacrifice three, she sacrificed 4 of her children for the sake of Abi Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. This lady who had the patience of an entire generation. When Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam and the Sabaya come back from Sham, Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam asks the poet Bishr ibn Hadlam to go to the city of Medina earlier and announce the arrival of the Sabaya and to tell the people to commemorate in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. She asks, Imam Zain al-Abidin asks Bishr ibn Hadlam to go and recite the poetry, and he says, Ya ahla Yathrib la muqama lakum biha. قتل الحسين فأدمعي مدرار الجسم منه مضرج بكربلاء والرأس منه على القناة يدار. O people of Yathrib, O people of Medina, how can you stay in your houses when Hussein was trampled, when Hussein's body was trampled in the city of Karbala, and his head was placed on a spear, touring city after city? They all gathered to see who died in Karbala. Everyone's asking about their loved one. We can turn off the lights. Everyone's asking about their loved one until Bishr ibn Hadlam sees a woman approaching him. He looks carefully and he realizes that this woman is Al-Baneen. Al-Baneen comes up to him and says, Ya Bishr, tell me what happened to my son Hussein. Now imagine this woman sent 4 of her children to Karbala, but she's not asking about them. She's asking about Hussein. So Bishr says, Ya Al-Baneen, عظم الله أجرك بولدك عثمان. O Al-Baneen, I send my condolences to you, for your son Uthman has departed from this world. She says, Ya Bishr, I did not ask you about my son Uthman. I asked you about Hussein. He says, Ya Al-Baneen, عظم الله أجرك بولدك Abdullah. She says, Ya Bishr, I did not ask you about Abdullah. I am asking you about my son Hussein. He says, Ya Al-Baneen, عظم الله أجرك بولدك جعفر. O Al-Baneen, I send my condolences to you for the departure of Ja'far. She says, O Bishr, I am not asking you about my sons, I am asking you about Hussein, until he says, Ya Al-Baneen, عظم الله أجرك بولدك العباس. Says, O Al-Baneen, I send my condolences to you for the departure of Al-Fadl al-Abbas. At that moment, Al-Baneen was carrying a child, and the child fell on the ground. She says, O Bishr, you have broken my heart, but I did not ask you about Abbas. I am asking you about Hussein. Tell me, is Hussein alive? He says, Ya Al-Baneen, يا أم البنين عظم الله أجرك بولدك الحسين. رحم الله من نادى وحسينا ومظلوما. And she begins to cry and say, Waladi Hussein, Waladi Hussein. This woman who lost 4 of her own children is crying about the child of Fatima al-Zahra. This is her taqwa. It is narrated that al-Baneen once said, لا تدعوني ويك البنين تذكريني باليوث العرين. كانت لي بنون ودعا بهم واليوم أصبحت ولا من بنين. يا ليت شعري أكما أخبر بأن عباس قطيع اليمين. al-Baneen alayhi salam was never able to go to the city of Karbala and visit Abi Abdullah ibn Hussein. So it is narrated that she placed 4 graves in Baqi and she would sit down and mourn her children. One for Abbas, one for Abdullah, one for Uthman, one for Ja'far, and she would mourn them as she was an old lady who couldn't go to Karbala. And she would sit and cry over these graves. أسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. With the tears that you have for al-Baneen, let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us remember our deeds. Let us remember our needs. Let us remember the grave and the hereafter, and let us ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah.